Crank up the volume and get ready for real-world bird hunting by listening to the Wingmen podcast by Eastman's. Now your host, Todd Helms.
All right, hey gang, welcome to another episode of the Wingmen podcast, and I am fortunate enough to have Ramsey Russell of GetDucks.com with me today. We've tried this a couple times, Ramsey, and it wasn't. We had some technical difficulties. We ran into a few snags, but here we are. We're on together. Man, we had some phenomenal conversations started, and I'm hoping we could pick back up where that left off. But I want to say thank you for being on the podcast with us, and give us the short spiel about who Ramsey Russell is and who Get Ducks is.
Hey, I appreciate y'all having me, and I think the reason we're having technical difficulty is because my wife is the brains and I'm the good look. And I can tell from looking through the screen, you probably got somebody just like that.
It's the same thing over here, brother.
Oh man, anything more than a smartphone and I'm lost. But I don't know where to start. A lot of people, I've told my story a lot. GetDucks.com has been around for 20 years. And right out of college, bought a really, really, really bad hunt. And back before the internet was really the internet, just kind of researched around through magazines and television and found an outfitter up in Alberta, went up there and hunted with him instead. It was awesome. Came back the next year with more people, the next year with more people. He called me aside for cold beer and said, "Hey, I'd like you to be my booking agent." I'm like, "What the hell's a booking agent? I'm a forester with the U.S. federal government." And he said, "Well, I want you to sell my hunt." And man, I was right on my way in a federal career as a registered forester and a certified wildlife biologist. Never dreamed that midway through that career, I would hit a crossroads and decide to go into this thing full time. And I tell you something very importantly I learned is that this business commands full time. Somebody asked me the other day, they said, one of the men I went to high school with, he was a kid then. He asked me, he said, "Man, this Get Ducks thing keep you busy? Is it a full-time job?" And I go, "Man, it keeps my wife and I busy for 8 days a week."
Right.
We never leave the office. We'll look around at the desk and I say, "Baby, it's 2:00 at night. It's 2:00 in the morning. Ready to go to bed? Let's find a stopping place." But that brings up a good point. I grew up duck hunting. I love to duck hunt. But it's 20 years later. GetDucks.com, the web page, the total package has become so much more than just duck hunting. It's almost become a life purpose. It consumes me. But that's what we do. And I'll tell you something very interesting is I really did kind of start down the rabbit hole of international wing shooting, collecting species, collecting the North American, not the 41, but the big list, close to 55 or 60. And then I realized beyond those borders, there's a whole world full of waterfowl species. And I've been fortunate enough to collect a bunch of them on 6 continents. But I grew up hunting, just roughing it, just standing crotch deep in button bushes or huddled up in the buck vines, in the mud, that kind of hunting, just down and dirty. And since doing it, I've realized chasing those species around the world with the different cultures and the different creeds and the different colors and the different religions and the whole ball of wax is it's so much more to it than just species. How I grew up hunting crotch deep in the button bushes, wow, has that changed? Hunting them. As you chase ducks around and hunt it, win and roam type ways, it just changes. It's different. The world's a lot bigger than our own backyards, Todd. And it's like, I've shot them in the mornings, in the afternoons, in flooded timber, in emergent marsh, and all these different habitats. I've shot them at night. I've shot them by light. I've shot them over bait where it's legal. I've shot them with electronic calls where it's legal, with live decoys where it's legal. I've jump shot them. I've pass shot them. I've shot them at 16,000 foot elevation. I've shot them 400 feet below sea level. One of the most humbling experiences was on the Bering Sea shooting eiders. Not a huge fan of sea duck hunting. It just doesn't vibrate, but you got to go there to get those species.
Right, right.
One of the coolest places, Mongolia. We'd driven for 6 hours on tire tracks through this wide open wilderness where most people go to shoot horned animals,
Right.
chasing bar-headed geese and ruddy shell ducks. And it's just the craziest thing. We stopped for lunch and there was this refrigerator-sized stone and had some flowers and stuff around it, right in the middle of nowhere. I mean, absolutely in the middle of nowhere. And in both Mongolia in the middle of nowhere and on St. Paul Island in the middle of the Bering Sea, I've never felt so insignificant relative to the universe because you're just out there. And my host pointed to that stone and said, "That's a headstone." And this was a massive rock.
I wonder.
I go, "A headstone for who?" He goes, "Nobody knows. It's over 2,000 years old." And I go, "You're kidding." And he goes, "And what's so interesting is that particular stone isn't found in Mongolia. Its nearest source is about 1,500, 2,000 miles from here."
So they hauled that thing in.
Yeah.
That's
who?
crazy. Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
And you
Somebody
see stuff
important
like that. A lot of my clients collect birds and collect species, and I respect that because I kind of do too. But I've got a tiny, tiny little game room. It's actually a little living room with chairs and a TV and a bar. It's where we hang out at camp. And it's just, so it's too many. I tell my kids all the time, when I die, y'all just bring up a big dumpster and throw it all in there and start over. It's too much. But I just realized one time somebody will point, that bar-headed goose, that red-crested poacher, that capercaillie, that's something else, and as I start telling the stories about those birds, Todd, it always, always, always comes back to people.
Yeah.
That particular person or that particular place or those people in that place or the way we hunted over those crude decoys or those handmade boats or barefooted in ice water. I mean, it's always something different. And that's really and truly what compels me about what I do and see in the world. It's really just not the species, and it's way beyond the numbers game. I don't count ducks. I shoot a lot of ducks in the course of a year because I normally hunt. When COVID's not around, I may hunt 200, 225 days a year.
Right.
But I have no idea or even interest in how many ducks I shoot because to me, just the numbers almost cheapen the sport.
Yeah.
That's kind of sort of who I am and where I'm coming from.
One of the things that I've seen, obviously I've watched quite a bit of your YouTube stuff and listened to podcasts. And one of the things, and it resonates, Ramsey, one of the things that you're talking about is, that headstone, for example. People might go with you and think they're collecting ducks, but they're collecting a lot more than ducks.
They're collecting experiences, man.
Right, exactly.
They are. Everybody says, we all get it. Everybody you talk to in a safari club type environment, oh heck yeah, there's guys that are chasing trophy animals, and I mean, big record animals, and I respect that, man, because that's taking it to another level. You know why I don't collect trophy game animals is because somebody asked me one time, he said, "Man, I can't believe you're not a trophy hunter in that truest sense because you travel 6,800 miles from home to shoot a certain species of bird." And I go, "Yeah, but the difference is this. The first one's kind of special. The next 100 is just like the first. They're all red-crested poachers. They're all bar-headed geese. They're all rosy-billed poachers. You see what I'm saying? They're all the same."
You shot one Rick Mallard, you shot them all.
Shot one, you shot them all. And I want to shoot 1,000,000 more, but I'm just saying, you shot one, you shot them all.
Yeah, and the ways you do it are different. Like you're talking about all these different places you go. And I grew up a lot further north than you, but probably hunted ducks pretty similarly. You talk about standing in knee-deep, waist-deep water and hunting floodings and here and there and real similar circumstances. So then when I get a chance to hunt mallards or whatever in a different setting, whether it's pick corn out here in the West or, who knows, big marsh stuff, that's special, but the duck is still the duck. It's the way I'm doing it. It's who I'm with. It's the experience that makes it.
the next great hunt is closer than you think. I have been fortunate to travel all over the world. I've got a lot of other places I want to go, but I do believe a man could commit himself to hunting just in the continental 48. And if you look at take Reelfoot Lake versus Oregon versus Mississippi versus Arkansas versus Michigan versus Maine, just the different, as I've noticed, the different double reeds versus single reeds versus metal reeds, the different cadences of the mallards. If you're hunting sea ducks, if you're hunting diver ducks, if you're hunting puddle ducks, if you're hunting in the timber, if you're hunting in the marsh, if you're hunting in the flooded ag, just the subtle little differences. And plus the fact we're blessed with so many ducks, geese, and swans.
Right.
You by the time you ferret out the species and go into the little localities and ferret out all the different techniques and the different styles and the different little almost like colloquialisms, it's endless. It's endless, and I'm fascinated by it. And man, when you fall off into some of these areas that are just steeped in this history and this heritage of like Chesapeake Bay or Tuckerton, New Jersey,
Right.
it's incredible. It's just incredible. And I don't know what it is that compelled me about it. I tell people all the time, I feel a lot like I'm walking through the pages of old school National Geographic magazine, but with a shotgun and hip boots.
Right.
And I really dig it. I just get into it.
Oh, that's cool. And it's fun to talk to you about that because you're a guy that's done things that maybe a lot of other guys aren't going to get a chance to do or would really like to. And it's on, there's things that are on their bucket lists, but you talk about that history, that culture. You've been all over the place. You and I dove into a relationship, into a kind of felt like a relationship at the time, into a conversation about how we do things here in the U.S., even conservation based versus in other places.
I think that's one of the most surprising observations I made. Now, look, I predicate this statement by saying this. Going back to Tuckerton, New Jersey, to Chesapeake Bay, to the market hunting, to that whole thing. Since then, we Americans have elevated waterfowl hunting to art form.
Yeah.
The calls, the decoys, the clothing, the boats, the motors, camo, the ammo, the whole ball of wax, everything is state of the art. And nobody, no other culture does duck hunting like Americans. When you go to places like Argentina that do it well, when you go to places like Mexico that do it good, Australia really does it well. They borrow from that. Most people don't. To the extreme would be Mongolia. You show up and there's a staff of 10 and they know where the wetlands are, so they know where the ducks are. You're hunting them in April, by the way. And it's not a trigger pulling contest. It's maximum 30 species or 30 ducks. And so you don't really waste your shotgun shells on mallards and pintails, although I have, because given the chance to hunt mallards and pintails that have never been shot at, who can pass that up?
Yeah, no kidding.
And that was a real interesting story, how we set up on those birds. But to the extreme, you show up, there's 8 of them. They got a pair of binoculars and 1 pair of rubber boots, no waders, no decoys, no nothing. And they point and there you are. And so, you're 7,000 some odd miles from home. And if you didn't bring it, you ain't got it.
Right.
So everybody brought a few decoys. Everybody brought a few calls. I brought, of course, a mojo, a dove, because they travel easy and that works just as well. And we scout and we put together and we hunt. We notice what the birds are doing and we start putting together plans for the different species. Russia, fine example. I'm going to hunt the White Sea in May for eiders. And so I knew them Russians didn't know how to hunt. So I brought long lines. I brought eider decoys. We were going to troll out there on the White Sea. And I step onto this little speedboat, this little metal speedboat. He speaks no English. I speak no Russian. Thumbs up, thumbs down. And what I learned is that don't always mean the same. When I see thumbs up, I'm thinking, hey, the fawns, that's good.
We're good to go.
That may not mean that at all.
Oh, man.
So I get on this boat and I'm saying, hey, I'm trying to explain and hand signal. How we're gonna let these decoys. He's nodding his head to give me the thumbs up. And he puts the freaking throttle to the metal and off we go. I'm hanging on for dear life. And I guess the decoys stayed in the boat. I never saw them again. But that ain't how they hunt eiders over there. They hunt eiders as fast as they can. And I never will forget, it was my turn to shoot. I'm holding a double trigger Russian Kalashnikov over and under in my right hand. I'm hanging onto the old ship bar with my left hand. My legs are spread. I'm pressing up against the gun walls so when we hit them waves, I don't come out the top. And it's like the world stopped down to slow motion. We Evel Knievel over a 4-foot wave. I'm looking over the gun barrel, holding it one hand, and that's where that eider turns to his left and looks left and like, what the hell's he doing? And I'm suspended between air, right eyeball level with him when he rolls. Kapoom, he rolls. Boom, we hit the water. Turn back around and go pick him up. That ain't American.
That's true running and gunning. That's what that is.
That's James Bond Russian. Eider hunting, man. There ain't nothing like it. And right about the time, and I just never forget the guy holding his thumb up, nodding his head like he understood perfectly what I meant about that.
No.
But the interesting thing, because this brings up your question about conservation, Todd. Nobody else does what we do. Russia, for example, it was my host over in Russia. I asked him, and this was broken English translation, but we belabored the point over vodka. Russia, man, look.
Oh yeah.
When you're up 20 kilometers from the Arctic Circle in May hunting capercaillie and sea ducks, it's like 2 or 3 days into it. Somebody says, "What time is it?" You look at your watch, go, "It's 10 o'clock." And you go, "AM or PM?" You shrug and say, "I don't know. It don't matter. I mean, you eat 3 meals a day, you hibernate, you get to go out and hunt about 6 hours when it's daylight, and you lose track of time."
Sure.
And your whole diurnal system gets turned off. And but at all 3 meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, you don't know which is which. There's vodka, and so it's everything you heard about Russia. They drink vodka. So one of the meals we were sitting down, I just asked Lexi, I'm like, well, how does this work? And what he explained to me is how it works is, in big terms, the government just basically gives responsibility to the hunters, because surely the hunters aren't going to shoot themselves out of house and home. That's kind of Europe has got laws, it's got bag limits, it's got some still shot or regulations like that, but there's no bag limits on waterfowl.
Okay.
It's bag limit free waterfowl. Argentina, there are bag limits, but there's gray area, and it's accepted. But universally, outside of the United States and Canada, let's say outside the North American waterfowl, Mexico, United States, Canada,
yeah,
they don't have what we've got. They don't have a system, a North American conservation plan. They don't have that. They don't have surveys. They don't have harvest data. They don't have band recoveries. They don't have scientists and biologists. If you look at our form of conservation here, what we enjoy in the United States, you've got the several agencies in the U.S. federal government. You've got the state agencies. You've got universities doing research, doing studies galore, plus the federal. You got NGOs like Ducks Unlimited and Delta Waterfowl and countless more at just a matter of scale. And just look at what those three do. And I know from talking to people around that some people don't like some of the NGOs. I don't like these guys. I don't like those guys. I don't like what they do. Let me tell you, son, what they do is incredible.
Yeah.
The federal government is doing a lot. Our federal government, USGS, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, with the refuges, with the sanctuaries, with the habitat, with the set asides for nesting grounds. You've got Ducks Unlimited pouring tons of money from the nesting grounds clear into the wintering grounds, the staging areas in between. You've got a tremendous amount of economic activity and scientifically based interest going into wildlife conservation in general, waterfowl. Because our waterfowl in the northern hemisphere, they migrate. Guess what? In the southern hemisphere, they don't migrate.
No,
These
they
birds are
don't.
just there.
They just hang.
Argentina, Peru, Africa, Australia, New Zealand. They're nomadic. They might shift 400 or 500 miles because it rained. I don't know how they knew it rained 500 miles away, but they do. They might shift a little bit to find habitat, but they don't migrate like
Okay.
ours do. So you can't just manage a migrating bird at one point on the trajectory. He's got to be managed the entire way.
Right.
And that's a tremendous amount of effort. I mean, to me, it's a teamwork, synergy, and accomplishment that really should be the envy of the world. But the fourth pillar of conservation is, in my humble opinion, one of the biggest, and that's us hunters. That's us hunters, man, because you look at the Pittman-Robertson Act, federal, the tax comes in spending. You look at there's a lot of sales tax programs. Look at hunting license sales. Look at the entire economy. And I hear people say all the time, and I know you've heard this too, Todd. Well, now commercial hunting, all this commercial activity and all this junk, that's just what's killing hunting. Well, baby, let me tell you what, without that monetary value, without that commodity value, there's no value at all in wildlife. And so they're gonna be just relegated to the butterflies and the songbirds that nobody cares about really. I look at the value, the commodity value of hunting a lot like pro sports. We hunters are recreationally enjoying this wildlife resource.
Right.
Same as we recreationally enjoy watching college football, watching pro sports. And that recreational interest in those regards has generated a multi-billion-dollar economy. Politicians, they see one thing, money. That's political relevance, money.
Yep.
And right now, best I can figure out, hunting generates about $7 billion to our economy. On the one hand, that's a whole lot of money.
Sure.
On the other hand, considering the New York City public school district annual budget is 22 billion, 75 billion nationwide really ain't too much.
Yeah.
I'm saying to a $12 trillion economy,
right,
75 billion ain't nothing, so but it's important. And in addition to that $75 billion that we're spending, we're still going to Ducks Unlimited banquets or Delta Waterfowl banquets. We're still spending money on raffle tickets and stuff we don't really need, but we do it for the ducks. And on top of that, I mean, just think of the on private lands. And I know it's a lot different in the Deep South than Wyoming, but this time of year down here in the Deep South, there are millions of acres being planted or to Jap millet, to corn, to beans, to manage for moist soil management that are intentionally being managed. Fuel, water, seed, fertilizer, spray, time going into wintering waterfowl habitat on private land.
Right.
That all of society benefits for. We American hunters demand it.
Right.
We demand it, and it's scary to think that in other countries like Argentina, they're clueless as to what they really have. They're absolutely clueless. They don't know. And the only saving grace you got is the fact that you have so negligible hunting pressure relative to even Wyoming.
Right. Yeah, and we're up in arms. I made a blog post 2 weeks ago when it was announced that they weren't going to do another survey this year. They weren't going to be able to do spring counts due to COVID 2 years in a row. And we throw up our hands like, what are you doing? We're all upset. And you're telling me that there's whole continents on the rest of the planet that don't have a clue, and they don't. So I guess if it's hunters that are propping it up here in North America with our dollars and with our Pittman Robertson money and supporting these NGOs like Ducks Unlimited at Delta, does there come a point when we're loving these ducks too much? Does there come a point when we could become our own worst enemy?
Yeah, I know what you're saying, and it's I think we could. I asked John Devaney of Delta Waterfowl, and he gave a very scientific answer that I can't repeat. I just can't articulate the way he did. John is a very, very good communicator. And I asked him about this the second year because of the pandemic that they aren't able to go up and survey and
Right.
do the counts.
Right.
And they've changed that model a little bit. And that's a saving grace. As you know, most of the seasons have already been set based on last year's survey. So it's set like a year in advance. You see, there's a little time lag. And the great thing about wildlife management, whether you're talking white-tailed deer or even if you're talking forest management, if you're talking any form of wildlife management, it's really not, generally speaking, it's not really snap of the fingers and it's over. It's a slow response. You got a little elasticity there in the population. It concerns me that Canadian borders are shut and they won't let they won't let my smart American scientists come up to count my ducks. I like to know what's in the bank account before I go swiping my debit card.
I hear you.
It bothers. So Trudeau, open your borders, but at the same time, I really do trust the system. I trust the system.
Right.
Big wheels turn real slow, especially when you got all those moving parts we talk about. And I'm a little impatient sometimes, but I trust them. You know what I'm saying? I know so many of them. I know so many of them. I went to school, so many of them, and I trust them. I just trust them. I know they know what they're doing. If anything, that they seem to be a little extra protective. You know what I'm saying? If you look at a lot of their policy in terms of, say, bluebills, I mean, there are more bluebills than ringnecks, but you can shoot one scop, 6 ringnecks. So
right.
some of those regards, they are extra protective and they take little baby steps to be sure. And that gives me comfort. That gives me comfort, And look at the Deep South hunters. Not like we're killing a whole bunch of them down here in the Deep South the last few years. And one thing I noticed, and now I'm getting back onto what you asked. I was in a state meeting not too long ago, comprised of state, federal NGOs in the state of Mississippi. All the agencies, all the little NGOs were there talking about waterfowl and wetlands conservation in the state of Mississippi. And I was just a bystander. I love to go to those meetings. I was invited to provide perspective. I don't know what perspective I can provide, but I'm proud to be there. And some of the state guys were talking about some public land, a very popular place in the state of Mississippi. It shot twice as many ducks as normal this year because the habitat quality was so excellent. And there was a line of standby hunters to get in, and they were turning down 5 or 6 parties a day.
Yeah.
And still those guys were coming back. And one of the biologists for the state said, to a lot of people that we talk to, they are just proud to have somewhere to hunt. That's how important these public resources are. And I asked the question, I said, I would like to see a survey, or if they were surveyed formally, I'd like to see if the average person you're talking about favors quality over quantity.
Right.
And that's a question I find myself, I find me asking myself, Todd. I think it's a question a lot of us wrestle with at some point in time. And the question I'm asking you, the listener, do you favor a quality duck hunting experience or quantity? In other words, would you rather go out 10 days a year and shoot nearer to your limit, or go out 60 days a year and shoot one or none? That's a fair question.
I think so.
I'm getting of the age, and I'm not going to stop. I hunted 22 states last year, a bunch, 150 days, just traveling around, hunt with friends and acquaintances and meeting new people in camps and getting a sample. But I hear this sitting in a duck blind with hundreds of people a year. I just hear this murmur that there aren't as many ducks, that the duck hunting is slower or whatever. And it just, all the hunters I know are proud to be there, and they're good people, and they're putting a lot of money into conservation, but they'd like to go out and shoot a few more ducks, wouldn't we all? I mean, let's face it, man, I don't care how old you are. If you duck hunt, nobody's out there just to watch the sunrise.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? We want to shoot something.
Yeah, I mean, there's differences between being as mad at them now as I was when I was 16 or 18 years old. A limit used to mean a lot more to me then than it does now. But at the same time, like you hit the nail on the head, I didn't go to watch the sunrise.
No,
I can do that. I can do that from my front porch with a cup of coffee in my hand. But I'd rather do it in a duck blind if I can kill a couple ducks in a day. That's awesome.
but in the last few years, it's just started to gnaw at me. You know, as you hear the conversations, especially in the South, about decline, in my words, not, you hear decline in hunting quality. It begs the question, why? Well, there's a lot of reasons why hunting has changed since the good old days of the 60s and 70s. There's a lot of reasons in the Mississippi Alluvial Valley Delta, the Delta. You know, it's a whole long algorithm full of inputs and reasons, you know, different crop types, different water distribution, different water quality. There's many different reasons. But something's changed. You know, I interviewed my uncle, my 75-year-old uncle, the other day, Todd, because my grandfather, we didn't just sit around and watch television. That wasn't his generation. He liked to sit around the kitchen table and tell stories. Well, 40 years later, don't I wish I had recorded him? You know, I wish I had, and I still remember a lot of them. And so I just reached out to my uncle and was talking to him about him growing up in those good old days in the 50s and 60s and early 70s with my grandfather. And we talked about them going to camp and just a lot of cool things like that. And that generation didn't hunt like we hunt. Not only has the habitat and water distribution and maybe the climate and the weather and the crop types and a lot of different things changed since then, we modern hunters that have elevated duck hunting to art form, man, we are passionate. We are serious. You know, I'm not the only one that missed little league games or holidays or schedule my leave at work around duck hunting. I'm not the only guy that does that. We all do that. And maybe I live in an echo chamber because of the nature of my business to get ducks, but every single person I talk to on the phone doesn't just hunt their backyard. They hunt many places. Yeah. In the United States and abroad, you know. Yeah. And we all do. Practically every duck hunter I know has been or is going out to the Central Flyway or further up the north or over to the East Coast or over to the West Coast, you know, trying to get as many days as humanly possible. Because in Mississippi, the season opens the Friday after Thanksgiving and closes around January 30th. But if I can kick off and head north to Canada or the Northern Tier, I can start in September. See, I can add days to my overall year.
Absolutely.
And I love it so much.
Absolutely.
We love it. But, you know, something else has changed since the 70s. And it's like we had this old market hunter on our, and look, by market hunter, I mean, this guy was market hunting back in the 60s and 70s down in Louisiana. And and he was a very, very good storyteller. But one thing he pointed out was back in the 60s, before a lot of the hardwoods in Louisiana Delta had been cleared, he knew where some duck holes were. All his neighbors knew where duck holes were, but there were lots of places that ducks could go and not get hunted.
Sure.
And it's increased technologically. It's increased. So we've got a passionate hunter. We've got technology that we're not walking in anymore. We're not riding little 110 Honda 3-wheelers anymore. Man, we've got thousand Rangers and Polarises, and we've got all this stuff that are motors back. We've got mud motors and longtails and all this technology. And man, there's hardly a square inch of the landscape that we can't access that we do access.
Right.
You know, and we're passionate, and it is you know,
we're better at killing ducks
we're better at killing ducks.
Yeah.
And there's really fewer and fewer places that there's more pressure. I think there's more pressure put on the United States ducks than there was back in the 60s and 70s. And there's fewer places that ducks can go and just do ducky things. And I got drawn into a conversation on another podcast about corn up in Illinois.
Oh boy.
And the behavior of ducks around the corn and doing this and it's short stopping. And all right, here's my question. Corn is grass. Chap millet is grass, rice is grass, springle top is grass. Are you saying we should just ban flooded grass? Well, no, I didn't think about it that way. Okay. But those ducks are getting in that corn and you can't kill them. The way they're behaving around that corn, they're coming in and leaving and doing this. And I'm like, well, there's probably more to it than just corn. Because a standing flooded cornfield is not 200 pounds of corn dumped in front of you blind. I've done that down in Argentina. And it's cover, it's habitat value. It is a place, because if I'm hunting a 160 acre cornfield and I'm shooting in a pit blind, I'm shooting 40-yard radius, I'm covering an acre.
Right.
I'm a forester, I can figure that out. I'm covering an acre of 100. That means there's 159 acres of dense cover a duck can get into and feel safe.
Right.
Maybe that's it. I've talked to some of these biologists that are looking at the satellite data on duck movements and stuff, and how these ducks are behaving, becoming nocturnal, staying on refuges. It's like the big myth, the observation, anecdotal observation is becoming a myth here in the deep South, is all the ducks don't show up till February, because Todd will go out to different properties and can't hardly buy a duck during season. A week after season closes, it's wall-to-wall ducks.
Yeah, it's the same.
They just showed up.
It happens here too.
But they didn't show up. They just, all of a sudden, there's no four-wheelers, there's no guns, there's no hunters. Now the ducks can just show up and they feel safe. So they're just coming out of hiding, And so I think, it's a very challenging time for a wildlife manager, especially state and federal. But I think it's really a trying time for us too, as hunters, on how do we move forward? How do we, let me ask you this, if you got young children, there's so many competing interests for children right now.
Oh man.
A kid is only going to go out and suffer through the duck hunt, because if you ain't killing no ducks day after day after day after day after day, it really ain't much fun.
Right.
They got to have those good days. They got to have those quality days to kind of hook them in. We got to balance that, man. We've got a lot of pressure. I see in places out west, California, Utah come to mind, sanctuary. Those clubs and those properties and those state and federal, they've got real inviolate sanctuary areas that those birds can get into. And they've got spatial sanctuary, geographic areas, and they've got temporal sanctuary, to where heavily hunted properties, in other words, a lot of public use, there's a multi-thousand acre sanctuary that you can't go into, and then they only shoot it 2 or 3 days a week. And it's crazy, man. I mean, that much hunting pressure on those Wednesdays and Saturdays, those shoot days, but the quality's good.
Right.
It works.
Right.
So
I saw that exact thing here. We got a little lease down on the river, and we got a bunch of ducks early, and it was like you said, they were nocturnal. The weather was warm. They were feeding at night. You could get them as they were coming back to the river first thing in the morning for about an hour, and it was hot and heavy, and it was great. And they really wanted to be in that one little spot, and we only shot it. I think we shot it maybe one day a week, Ramsey. I mean, it was like Saturday. You can go down on Saturday and shoot it, and not shooting into big groups, shooting pairs and singles, whatever with decoy, kind of trying to save those ducks, and let them have that spot. And some pressure started to come from the other side of the river that we don't have leased, and it started to come more often than what I wanted to see. There wasn't anything I could do about it, because it was what it was. But man, those ducks were gone in the course of a week. You know, they were just not there. And the ones that did stay and tried to use it were completely almost impossible to shoot. You know,
it gets that way. You got to remember, I'll tell you the story. Way back when, a quarter century ago, I was working with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in the North Delta of Mississippi. I was a forester and did a lot of biological work too on a refuge complex that covered the entire North Delta. And one time Ducks Unlimited called and said, their biologist called our biologist and said, there's a cohort of ducks using y'all sanctuary at the Homey Refuge. 3 of the hen mallards have radio transmitters. And I would have said back then that those ducks would hop off into one of the bean fields or rice fields nearby. That's where they were using, just something very local. It's like if you lived in a big, well, it's like if I walked out my front door and I drove a half mile, boom, there's a grocery store, right? That's what I kind of thought.
Right.
And do you know, Todd, that every one of those ducks, the band associated with that cohort and those hens that died 45 miles away in Stuttgart, Arkansas. 45 miles. They were roosted in this little buckbrush timber area. They would get up at daylight, fly 11 miles west, cross the Mississippi River, fly into the mouth of the White River, and fly north up the White River through, but just millions of acres of habitat to go to certain rice fields in Arkansas. And that really started changing everything I ever thought about duck behavior.
No kidding.
Wow. I mean, how many people blew calls at those ducks as they were flying? And at that meeting I was telling you about, that wetlands meeting a few weeks ago, there's a property up in North Delta, Mississippi called York Woods. Probably the crown jewel of Mississippi in terms of management and effort and everything else. Very low hunting pressure, very elite land holding, but right next to it, a mile maybe, is Coldwater National Wildlife Refuge, part of the complex I used to work for. And it's the Inviolate Sanctuary. And I can remember flying surveys back in the day and looking down and seeing 50 to 60,000 ducks just on that 1,500 acre complex.
Wow.
Okay, they were sacked and they're good. And the refuge manager and one of the guys, one of the biologists in there got to talking, with the crowd the other day. And they ban ducks on York Woods, and they do some band surveys and some transmitter surveys. And what they've determined is mallards sitting a mile away on Coldwater Refuge do not use Coldwater, York Woods.
That's
I
crazy.
mean, a mile away, bazillion of mallards, but they don't overlap just that mile. They've got their own distinct little phyllo-patry for this area,
right?
These feeding areas, and that kind of blows my mind. So you read it, what that says to me is I read the South Delta report where I hunt, and all of a sudden we get a slug of new birds. That doesn't mean they're all coming equal chance of coming to my property. Just a select few that have been there and used it for whatever reason. You see what I'm saying?
I do.
It's just starting to change the way I think about ducks.
They've learned the same thing with mule deer out here with the mule deer migration. You've got does that go back to the exact same places, summer range and then winter range, year after year after year. They follow almost to the step the same migration routes. And if those does get eliminated, you lose those does, then you've lost a whole bunch of bucks that would winter and follow the same migration. You'll have drainages with fathers, sons, and I mean a whole lineage of mule deer bucks in the same summer range, in the same drainage. You'll see different age groups. Well, there's a good chance they're all related, and the doe that brought them there as fawns is just down the hill, 1,000 feet, and that's where she winters, or that's where she summers. And then obviously during the rut, they disperse and they go all over the place and do things looking for deer, looking for does. But in those summertime ranges, man, you can literally shoot out an entire genetic a genetic group of mule deer if you hunt them all on that migration route, and because you're shooting them, they're all related. It's nuts. And we're seeing the same thing with ducks. It makes me wonder, and I'd be interested to hear what you have to say on this, but it makes me wonder how important then not shooting hens becomes.
The biologists say it statistically doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I don't see how it cannot.
That's me.
I don't see how it cannot, but I'm not that kind of smart biologist. I was always more field oriented, habitat more oriented, and I don't understand it. But we're starting to see some stuff like, right now there's a movement underfoot. Take the pintails. Look, Todd, if I'm having just a wonderful day and life is going too good, all I have to do, if I want to get my teeth kicked in on social media, all I have to do is hold a limit of Drake pintails from Mexico. And you would think the sky is falling because all us hunters that go to Mexico are killing too many pintail, and that's why they're known pintail. But it's been demonstrated back since the 70s that no-till farming practices is a big culprit of pintail. You know what I'm saying? They're short grass prairie nesters, got a long neck, comes up, periscopes around. And so much of the short grass prairie has been converted to agriculture. And a lot of those prairie soils is no-till farming. So you come into, the farmer drives up this spring and he's looking at last year's barley stubble, and pintails use it. They nest in it. And so there are a lot of eggs. I know a lot of those farmers are trying to avoid them, and I've seen contracts where they put chains to shoot the hen off, but the eggs can't fly away.
Right.
And so there's millions of eggs being disked under. That's what they say. But there's a movement underfoot that after 30 years of conservative pintail harvest management, the pintails really aren't responding and booming. And you go out to places like California, and for every 6 to 10 Drake pintails you see, and there are just gazillions of them, you see one hen. And there's actually and right now the continental, the lower 48 limit is 1. There's a movement to increase the bag limit to 3 pintails, no more than 1 hen. Because when you've got that kind of sex ratio skewed, as I understand it, those, not all hens lay eggs equally. They get kind of stressed out with boyfriends.
There's too much pressure on them. Yeah.
There's too much pressure on them, and so there could be some things like that. I know, who knows? There's so waterfowl have been studied so much, and yet the more I listen to biologists and listen to some of these conversations, record some of these biologists, it's almost like the more questions I have. I remember this back in the early 90s. I wanted to be a deer biologist. That's why I went to Mississippi State Wildlife Program. I wanted to be a deer, I wanted to be the next Dr. Deer. And I ended up down on a South Texas ranch, 60 miles from the Mexican border, 107,000 acres of just free range white-tailed deer, trophy management galore. And I guess it's around early October, we were doing helicopter surveys. The monarch butterflies came through. And I don't mean just a bunch of butterflies. I'm talking about, it's a real dry environment.
Right.
You would pull your truck down in this little shady area where the soil was wet and butterflies could lick the soil and get water. And there were so many butterflies, you couldn't see that little ram on the hood of the truck, a little Dodge. You couldn't see nothing. It was just millions of butterflies.
Wow.
And as you read and study about those little bugs a little bit, it's hard to believe it, but it takes generations for the monarchs to migrate from Mexico to Canada and back. And yet their progeny will show up and lay eggs in the same spot on the same bush
It's unreal.
that their ancestors had. That just blows my mind.
I know.
And along those lines, I heard this story from Doug Osborne was telling me the story. He had banded a widgeon, and a associate, a landowner he has called, and his little boy had shot that widgeon within 7 feet of where it had been banded 4 years earlier.
You know, it's interesting that you say
7 feet.
That's crazy. I did so woodcock. Growing up where I did, we shot a lot of grouse and a lot of woodcock, a lot of rough grouse, a lot of woodcock. And the local university and one of their biologists, one of the professors there, started a woodcock banding project. And lo and behold, we're out hunting woodcock in the area where they banded them. And my dad shoots, the dog goes on point, walk in, flush, dad shoots this bird, dog brings it back, and it's got a band on it. And it's bright, shiny silver band. Well, it turned in numbers on it. Same thing. It was like 30 feet, 35 feet from where they banded it. And they ended up, I think probably partially because of that, they ended up closing hunting down in that area. You couldn't hunt it anymore because they were killing all their banded birds before they had a chance to migrate. And they couldn't gather any info on them. But that's unreal that the bird would just stay right there. But I mean, we see it with Canada geese on golf courses in the Midwest. They don't leave. You know, they'll band them in the spring as soon as they're big enough to hold a leg band on, and they'll come back the next year right to the same spot.
We're going through some old photo albums with my uncle. My granddad passed when he was 72 years old, and his entire hunting career back during the good old days boils down to 2 photo albums and 5 or 6 dozen little square baseball card size photographs, gritty as can be. And but I have found some records and some notes of what he called Goose Club. This was the central delta of Mississippi. They'd go out of Lake Ferguson, go down the Mississippi River in a boat, big boat, think of it like a Gulf Coast boat.
Sure.
And they would dig into sandbars and they would camp for 2 weeks. And the budget I found, would be like 10 pounds of butter, 20 pounds of flour, just a real camp, military expedition.
Oh, yeah.
They camp for 2 weeks, dig in and camp, and wearing rubber waders and Air Force flight suit, for camo and warmth, and just back in the good old days. But his passion, and if you talk to old Hank Burdine, I interview a bunch, a Mississippi historian, they that generation were goose hunters, man. They were goose hunters. And there was a interior population of geese that flew that far south and on into Louisiana at times. But by the early to mid 60s, my granddad and that generation were driving up to Cairo, Illinois to shoot Canada geese.
Right.
And now you talk to the folks around Cairo or Ballard County, Kentucky, there's very few geese. Because what you're talking about.
Kelly Powers told me that.
Yeah, the migration
same thing.
But here's something interesting. Now, a lot of people say, I don't like the word global warming, and it sounds too alarmist. But let's face it, the average winter temperature is warmer now than it was.
No,
then.
Absolutely.
If you want to hear the words global warming over and over and over, go anywhere in Alaska.
Yeah.
Go anywhere in Alaska and they'll wear you out with it, because they're seeing real-time changes in terms of fisheries, in terms of hunting, in terms of just water and everything else. They're seeing and experiencing it. But I believe, practically speaking, that we humans try to compress in everything in a human lifetime, 70 or some odd years, but the Earth has got a geological time frame,
right.
Millions of years. And there's a carbon cycle that just exists. Point in case, all those glaciers that are melting up in the Arctic didn't exist when Arizona was the bottom of an ocean.
Right.
Right. I'm powerless. Look, I'm powerless to change that. If all of America quit driving cars today, India and Pakistan and China's going to still be driving. So we humans are powerless against that. So let's worry about something else. But something interesting. we're talking about, some of these migrations are changing, birds coming down. Here's something interesting. I noticed in the last few years, black-bellied whistling ducks are coastal species.
Uh-huh.
And after back in 2005, 2006, hurricanes Katrina and Rita, a lot of coastal marsh damage, a lot of upward wind. And beginning then, I started seeing black-bellied whistling ducks nesting using wood duck boxes and everything else up in the Delta of Mississippi. Never saw them before then.
Interesting.
And this year, I was at camp for about a week, and my son had been out looking at some public land. He come in and said, "I found a good shoot for tomorrow. Why don't you and Mr. Ian, and I got a couple of buddies coming. We're going to go in there and hunt tomorrow." And I said, "Okay." So we hatched a plan. We're going to meet and park and walk a mile in. And been a while since I did that on public land, but it was worth every bit of it. But he told me, he said, "There's a lot of whistling ducks." I said, "Really?" He said, "Man, there are a ton of black-bellied whistling ducks in here." Now, usually in my lifetime, I turned 55 last week. Uh, since Katrina, you see these black-bellied whistling ducks in Mississippi Delta, but usually around mid to late September, when the blue wings start coming through, those birds are gone.
They're gone.
They push back down the coast. They go back further south. And we went into that hole about mid-January. I'm going to say around Christmas, early January. We went in and we shot half limits of black-bellied whistling ducks.
Wow.
And I did a podcast. Big Water and I were talking about it. And my inbox blew up with people from Wisconsin, Indiana, Ohio. I got a picture this morning, a video from a buddy of mine, Murray Paget, up in Delaware, an iPhone video of a pair of black-bellied whistling ducks nesting in Delaware. Those birds are expanding. Their population is expanding. And I told my son, I said, what's going to be crazy is it's possible that decades from now, you're walking out of the woods with your son and y'all got another 12, or whatever black-bellied whistling ducks swinging from the strap.
In Wisconsin.
And you tell my grandson, I can remember my daddy shooting his first ones when he was 55 during ducks in Mississippi duck season. I've shot them down the coast before.
Sure.
But then become a bread and butter duck. So there's,
wow.
There's bound to be different kinds of changes, and it's very interesting to see.
That's such a solid point because, I remember when I first moved out here and saw green-winged teal in January. And I'm like, what are you little turds doing? What are you little turds doing out here? And we're not lousy with them like Utah can be.
Yeah.
But we got lots of them. And, the blue wingers, and they go through Labor Day weekend. We always get a push of them. And I wish Wyoming had an early teal season because there are some marshes that do fill up. You could get some good shoots, but I remember I was jump shooting ducks on a little prairie creek over in northeastern Wyoming, and that's all we had. Didn't have a lot of ducks in there, but it was December, like you said, about Christmas time. And I'm walking along, jump shooting mallards. I mean, that's what there was, mallards. And it was hard to decoy in there. It was a real small creek. Anyway, jump shoot. I walk into this corner, pop out, and this pair of birds gets up. And I knew they were ducks, but it never registered in my mind what they were because I hadn't seen teal in the snow like that before. And as they're flying away, I went, those are green-winged teal. Well, I was ready for them the next time, and I was able to kill the drake. But now, I mean, they make up a pretty regular place on our bag limit during the day.
To me, green-winged teals are one of the most ubiquitous North American species. I've shot them in
cool
all
bird.
the habitats in all the states, from the opening day through the late season. I mean, literally from Delaware and Maine and New Hampshire, clear over to Utah, California, like you say, deep south, far north. And they're really anymore, they seem to be. I mean, they're just purely anecdotal. But the habitats I hunt and when I've hunted, they seem to be more abundant. I see more of them maybe than mallards.
Yeah. I can see
It's
that.
just, and that's a good problem to have. 'Cause I sure love green winged teal.
Oh man, yeah.
I love them.
Not only are they fun to hunt, but there's very few things that cook up in a frying pan like green winged teal does.
Oh boy, I mean,
And it's just simple salt, pepper, and butter, and it's like that is all you need. I had, of course, working here with the Eastmans, their big game. That's been their whole life, and the last couple of years I've been able to get them out on some hunts, and they really enjoyed themselves. I remember Ike actually killed a green winged teal one of the first times I took him out, and he said, "All right," and I said, "Dude, you got to eat that bird." I said, "The rest of they're all good birds. They're all eat, but that one's special." And I said, "You got to do something. Just do me a favor and do this with it." He took it home and he called me that afternoon and he said, "Yeah, my girls, he's like, I got one little nibble and my daughters ate that thing up so fast. It was."
you want me to tell you something funny? From coast to coast, north to south in the United States of America, Canada and Mexico, but everywhere in the Northern Hemisphere, Pakistan, Azerbaijan, Netherlands, places like that, Mongolia, that's their favorite bird to eat.
No kidding.
Green
So
winged teal.
it's not just us.
When we show up in some of these camps, we always want to eat ducks, and it's not like we go through and tell them what to cook. We just say,
Right.
Yeah, we'd like to eat some ducks. And when they serve them that night, it's always green winged teal.
That's the filet mignon of the duck world, I tell you. That is
really
crazy.
Is.
And
fat.
Yeah, they're fatty. They're just good little bird. And I really liked growing up. We had a ton of wood ducks, and we could only shoot 2, but you'd go out and hunt a beaver pond for ducks, and you'd shoot your 2 drake wood ducks like no problem. And there'd be 1,000 or 1,500 wood ducks come into that pond, and you're sitting around waiting for like a black duck or, God forbid, a mallard or something. And we had more wood ducks than we had anything else. And I always scratched my head. You're young and you don't understand things, but I always scratched my head, man, why can't we shoot 5 of these like we could everything else? Well, because that's where all the wood ducks were at that time of year. But it's crazy. I did a turkey hunt on the Yellowstone River on a jet boat 3 weeks ago, a month ago maybe. The amount of wood ducks flying up and down the Yellowstone River blew my mind. I mean, you expect to see a handful here and there, but we probably saw in that day, we saw a couple hundred wood ducks flying up and down, and they're all paired up, getting ready to breed in those big cottonwoods that are hollow. And they must leave real early because you don't see them. You don't hardly see them out here in the fall. Every now and then somebody will get one, but this time of year, man, they were everywhere. Everywhere.
Speaking of wood ducks, I was out in California. Pintails, mallards, speckled bellies. That's what was teal. That's
Right.
what was on my mind. And I actually went on a hunt down the Butte Sink on the river for wood ducks, and I was hunting with Brian Huber, birdologist, who worked for California Waterfowl Association. He got to tell me about their wood duck box program in California, and it requires about 600 volunteers, because wood duck boxes have to be serviced. You have to put pine straw and clean them out, do
Right.
stuff, not pine straw, but wood chips.
Right.
And they have produced 1 million wood ducks. That nest box program has produced 1 million wood ducks. And that was the most incredible thing I've ever seen, was hunting those wood. That's the last bird on earth I expected to
In California. Right.
in California, but
Right.
they've got a bunch of them in places.
Yeah. Oh, and they're fun. They're fun too. I mean, nothing screams to the decoys like they're just kamikazes.
How many shovelers y'all got out in Wyoming?
Early, lots.
Yeah.
Lots. They
you look like a shoveler killer to me now.
Shoveler killer, sure. Shoveler eater. No, we actually we had a hunt 2 years ago, maybe 3, opening day. Guy had a problem with his irrigation and it flooded a bunch of his corn, and it flooded it right to the ears. And that doesn't happen out here. We don't have flooded corn. But we did that day, and I'll bet you probably half the ducks we shot were shovelers, or we could have shot. It was unbelievable. And you'll go by ponds in the spring, and man, those northern shovelers are everywhere. And you see them, big clown-looking drakes, and they're a cool-looking bird. I remember the first time I ever shot one, Ramsey. snuck up on this little beaver pond back in UP, and we looked up and we're like, oh, there's teal. And we popped up and we hosed, I don't know, not 2 limits, but we shot a bunch of them, and dog starts bringing them back, and I'm looking, I'm like, oh, they're shovelers. Cool.
Yeah. God bless them. There are parts of the world, they call them Ramzillas. And that joke is caught on such that down in Mexico, they got some of the places we hunt in Obregon, they've got Ramsey blinds, but then they got one Ramzilla blind.
Yeah.
Is, when I show up, I go to it, and if we shoot 20 ducks, 19 of them are gonna be shovelers.
Oh.
And, I tell you something funny is golly, I'll make this story quick. First time I hunted with Mojo down in Argentina, it was myself and the late Mike Morgan, who I've known since I was 19, and Terry Denman. And we went out and shot a bunch of ducks, all kinds of species down in Argentina. And after we got done, Denman said, well, Ramsey, give us a rundown of what we got here today. And I started naming them off: widgeon, speckled teal, white cheek pintail, brown pintail, rosy bill poacher, red shoveler, something. Hey, whoa. And he looked at the camera and said, I'm from Louisiana, ladies and gentlemen. I did not shoot a shoveler. Well, that became a running joke. Mike was a homeboy from Mississippi. So a few years later, we went out to Texas. Denman couldn't make it, so he sent me and Mike. And man, we shot mallards, we shot pintails, hunted them in the field, the river, with the late J.J. Kent. And he come into us on the 3rd or 4th morning. He said, man, I have got a hell of a good shoot lined up. The problem is it's nothing but shovelers. And Mike and I looked at each other and shrugged and said, well, that's fine with us, man.
Yeah.
Boy, let me tell you what, it was nothing but shovelers. We shot there were 6 of us in the blind. We shot 6 limited ducks, 1 green wing. He just got mixed up with the wrong crowd, I'm afraid.
Yeah, exactly.
Dakota Stowers popped him. we dug in. They named that episode. Well, we sent a picture to Denman with all those shovelers, and he texted back. And he said, I will never let you two hunt for Mojo again without adult supervision.
Yeah.
And I thought he was kidding. I told this story at Mike's funeral. I thought he was kidding. He wasn't kidding. He never sent us on assignment again. They named that episode Spooning Crockett.
Perfect.
It was the most watched episode of Mojo ever.
Perfect.
So this became a running joke. And I finally talked Denman into going down to Sonora, and we were going to target Mexican mallards, which are like they're their own species, but they're mallard-like, part of that 13 species mallard complex. And in that regard, they represent to me one of the most underexploited mallard resources in North America, because so few people down there will really put out the decoys and call to them, and they'll work great. So I talked them into going, and I'm sitting in a deer stand one day thinking about this, and a buddy of mine, Jason Chuley, I think he's from Indiana, he had this. He's a world champion decoy carver now. I mean, just the real deal.
Yep.
But as a little side gig, you could send him in a used Mojo, and he would refurbish it into species they didn't make.
Yeah.
I had this idea, and I reached out to him in social media and said, I want you to make me shovel decoy. He said, yeah, that's fine. I said, well, I want to put teeth on it. He said, what do you mean teeth? I said, like teeth.
Like he's smiling.
And man, he started crawfishing. Just a little bit he did. And finally I said, and I want a gold tooth in the middle of his smile. And man, he come unhinged. And I finally said, look, this is a practical joke on the owner of Mojo. He said,
Yeah.
I'm all in. So 2 weeks later, it arrived at my house. Boom, I could put it on a plane, take it down to Mexico. And when I did the little film, the little iPhone film, kind of showing it off, I stuck it out there in the dark, and Terry didn't know what I was doing, just putting the Mojo out. But as I did the little film, an extra magnet had gotten under one of them wings to where it was cavitating real bad.
Oh, jeez.
And that just made it even funnier. The thing went viral. And 3 days later, Denman catches me in the airport. We're fixing to part ways. He says, we're going to make that spoon deal. He said, I've had 50 phone calls. The office has gotten 50 phone calls wanting to know what is a Ramzilla and when are we going to produce it?
I wondered about the backstory on that one, because that blew up.
Here's the funny thing. I'll take that Ramzilla, that little, because it's a small decoy. I can carry it to far-flung places, put it in my bag. Other countries don't get it. I take it to Azerbaijan, Pakistan, wherever. They don't get it because to them, a shoveler's a duck.
Right.
They see that teeth and it's just lost in translation. It's not a smiling mallard. It's not a Hollywood. It's not a baloney snatcher. It's just a duck. They don't get it.
Right.
You know, the Australasian shoveler in Australia, they call it a blue wing shoveler, is protected. That's their preeminent trophy species is a shoveler. That's the bird they all prize, you know. And so isn't it funny how a shoveler just got this notorious reputation in them? I wonder how that started.
I don't know. There's a bird here that we get a ton of that exists to a lesser degree, and that's our common golden eyes. And holy smokes, I mean,
shell crackers, I've heard them called.
Dude, they are a sporting bird. I mean, they dive bomb, they buzz decoys like nobody's business. They're fast. They're a pretty bird. They're super plentiful here at certain times when it gets real cold. Yeah. But for a guy out here that wants to shoot mallards, and it's like you get a bunch of dudes from your neck of the woods that never get them, and they want to shoot them, and they come all the way out here and shoot them, and they'll shoot 5 of those things and be happier than a pig in poop. And I'm going, all right, I thought we were here to shoot mallards, but
no, I love them, man. Mallards are the duck of the North American duck hunting world. Think about it. The whole culture evolves around mallards. Mallard calls, mallard decoys. They behave right. They do right. They do good. And, you know, you start climbing down a rabbit hole like we started off talking, you know, that's where the pass shooting, jump shooting, speedboat and everything else come from, because not all birds behave like.
Right.
I'm going to Africa in several weeks to follow up with a hunt down there. You know, Cape shell ducks, whiteback ducks, a lot of those species aren't going to decoy. You're either going to spot them and find them and jump shoot them, or you're not going to get a shot.
Right.
So, you know, when in Rome. And but mallards make the world go round. There's no doubt about it.
Oh, that's true.
And shovelers do too. Don't think I don't shoot my shovelers.
We don't get a ton of them. I mean, they're here, but they're only here for, you know, our first split, our early split, and then they're gone, and you don't see them. You might see them a little bit, but for the most part, they're gone. So you don't get a lot of opportunity at them. But they're a cool bird. And there's times when, that's all you're going to end up with on those early hunts.
A lot of clients that go to, in fact, all the clients go to Mexico. Not all of them, but most of the clients go to Mexico. They've got this ideal of shooting a green wing, because man, look, in February, those birds are
perfect.
Yeah, they want to shoot a green wing, blue wing, cinnamon, and do a little trio mount. It's a beautiful mount. It's you know, the whole North American little teal mount in one little mount.
Yep.
It's beautiful. But you know, truth of the matter is that green wing is kind of an oddball on that mount. And a few years ago, American Ornithological Society, that names these birds and speciates them, they reclassified a lot of species from the genus Anas into a genus called Spatula. Now you've got shovelers and cinnamons and blue wings and gargony over in Asia, and a lot of other birds, about 8 of them classified under Spatula. And it really makes better sense, because you want to see a pretty mount, look at the cinnamon, the blue wing, and the shoveler, and say a dead mount. Look at their wings; they're nearly identical. It takes a biologist, my very experience, to see just the wing and know what it is.
Right.
You know, and so it really makes better sense. And when you start thinking about a shoveler as being first cousin to a blue wing, okay, a little more palatable then.
I'm gonna use that one. I'm using that one. It's like, well, he's just another part of a blue wing, is all he is. He needs love too.
He really is. He really is.
Oh man.
Do y'all get a lot of swans there in Wyoming?
No. They'll pass through. You see them occasionally here and there, but they stay in that Pacific flyway more than anything, and they stay east of us more in the Dakotas.
Yep.
Like I said, you get some, you see some, but not that we don't have huntable numbers. that come through. That's why we don't have a season in Utah and Montana do. So I
My
don't know.
life list
It's
right
weird.
now, I'll continue traveling and doing what we do as the borders open with this pandemic thing. But
You think you're
you
going to
know,
be able to go to Canada this year?
man, I say
Oh.
right now, I say flip a coin. Heads you do,
Yeah.
tails you don't.
Yeah.
But really and truly, the best, if you believe the politicians, if they don't move the goalpost, if and but. Last I heard talking to Ryan Reynolds, one of our U.S. Hunt List outfitters, just last week we recorded. Beginning in June, they've got 3 21-day phases for vaccinations. So, as I understand it, first phase, second phase, third phase will put them at around 75% population vaccinated. That would put them at August 17th.
Oh.
And they've said that if they achieve that, and here I'm saying, if they don't move the goalpost, if the liberals don't change, blah, 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 that they might start to open. Well, you know, so there's a chance, there is a chance it'll open. I'm not going to hold my breath, you know, and from a client perspective, it's, I know this, you know, the average guy can't find out on August 20th that he's going to be able to redeem his September 7th hunt. He's got to make arrangements at work. He's got to buy airfare. So at best, only the latter half I think will be able to redeem it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But guys like me and you, or guys like me, I mean, shoot, let me find out the border's open and that little white truck will be heading north, son. You know.
Yeah. No, it's interesting to hear you say that. I put together a little blog last week about, you know, Canada open or Canada not. So what? There's lots of opportunity right here in the United States that you can take advantage of.
Thank you. That's a great point. Because I asked Ryan this. Think about this, man. Think about this. All these guys were going to Canada, crossing the border, passports, declarations forms, the whole ball of wax, strip searches if you cross the wrong border.
Right.
And like I said, the next great hunt is closer than you think right here in America. And I wonder how many people are going to want to go up to Canada to shoot 2 more ducks. I mean, when you can hunt them, I mean, North Dakota, Utah, I mean, the United States has got great hunts going on that time of year. Canada goose hunting, man, you know, there's a lot of states right now because of those resident New York, Wisconsin, North Dakota, 15 bird limits.
I know.
I mean, that's a heck of a hunt, man.
And they open in late August.
Yeah.
You know, it's and I talked about some of that stuff, Ramsey, that it's like, if you're going to spend money on an outfitter, or you're going to spend money on a hotel or this and that, there's folks here in the US that could use that money too.
I guarantee you.
You know, and it's like, I kind of broke it down from moving early in the season in that northern tier of states with waterfowl and upland. Because, I mean, there's no reason you couldn't go to the northern Minnesota or northern Michigan or Wisconsin and hunt early geese in early September. And in the afternoons, when you're done hunting geese, go hunt grouse and woodcock. Why not?
Absolutely.
Or go walleye fishing. Or, I mean, the possibilities are endless, you know, and I kind of talked about that. Good grief, come out west and hunt mountain grouse and do some fly fishing for trout.
Absolutely.
There's so much to do. And I kind of followed it all the way down through in the months. You know, I talked about, obviously we think hard about January, about December, November, December, January, even into February out here. But there's so many opportunities from where you're at to Texas. You know, I've got an itch to hunt cranes in Texas for some crazy reason, probably because I grew up with ridiculous numbers of sandhill cranes in the east end of the UP that we couldn't hunt. And I want to hunt cranes something fierce, and I'll pull it off. But
well, thanks to COVID, and there's one silver lining of the whole experience from my standpoint, you know, can't travel, couldn't go to Canada, couldn't go to Argentina, couldn't travel around.
Right.
And I just realized there was a lot of United States I'd not seen. And none of the conventions were going. SEI was not happening. Dallas Fly Club didn't have
no shot show. Yeah.
Man, I left home on about the I started teal hunting, say the 11th of September, 12th of September, whenever it opened in Mississippi, went down to Texas, Louisiana, came home, changed gears, headed north, got home for Thanksgiving Day, the day after, left Saturday afternoon after Thanksgiving, come wheeling back in on Christmas Eve, was home for a week in Mississippi, hunt with my kids, left to go to California. And 2 days later, went to Mexico. I mean, man, I killed 150 days, covered 22 something states.
Right.
And my life list changed because I want to go. I realized, man, there's a lot of United States I haven't hunted. Well, I'm down to 8 states of the 49 I can hunt, and I want to shoot ducks there.
Right.
And experienced it, man. And it's so rewarding to climb into a blind and just go hunt a little beaver pond in Iowa, or go hunt a marsh, or go hunt public land, or go just to see your slice of the world.
Right.
Your little slice of the pie of American duck hunting is so rewarding. And now I've added another one. I think you can apply to draw to hunt swans. You can either buy them over the counter or apply, but I think non-residents can hunt 9 states. You can hunt swans in 10 states. And man, I want to scratch a swan off in all 10 states that I can.
Why not?
And to hear the conversation, I think swan opportunities may open up. Some of these other states and the upper Mississippi Flyway may have a swan season soon. I was hunting with some guys in Alabama, last story, on that big whirlwind tour. I come through northern Alabama, and we went out to this little property right next to Wheeler Refuge, private land. And it was still, it was the glass that deep, 6 inch deep, looked like a mirror. It was so still. And I was with a decoy carver and a historian and a biologist, and we go out with their kids, and we shot a pair of mallards. That's it. But that was it. Check. Killed a duck in Alabama. And about this time, these Canada geese started working over the refuge, and they broke out calls, and they called them, and they weren't going to land this little bitty pothole we have. But it was a fly over about 30 yards high. Bam, I shot one, and my host just went nuts. He's like, man, you guys, that's unbelievable. And I go, well, it's just a Canada goose. Says, I've been hunting here 5 years, and that's the first one we shot. And he says, Ramsey, when we get done, I'm going to show you something and why you'll appreciate this. I said, okay. So we go park a truck, and over there by where we park a truck up front, there's a little storage shed, and we open it up, and there's this pile of these homemade silhouette decoys. And I'd heard of the lost flyway of Alabama before, but on this property, right in the city limits of Decatur, Alabama, was this club they were hunting. Used to be a goose club, Decatur Goose Club. And the number one rule was those decoys I was looking at got stuck out in the fields around the blinds on opening day and never left. And he was telling me that gravel road we were parked on, he said, you'd come out here when the geese were in, and there were just guys sitting in trucks, heaters running, smoking cigarettes, whatever, waiting on their turn to get in their pit. You shoot. Your second rule was, when you get your 2 goose limit, get out. Let somebody else get in.
Yep.
And now those geese don't come there anymore. But you know what's happened is the greater sandhill crane population, Alabama, God bless Alabama, man. They work with Fish and Wildlife. They got these biologists on board, and they have created a lottery system for residents only right now to shoot sandhill cranes. Those sandhill cranes have moved in, have exploded, and are occupying the same ecological niche as those Canada geese did. So now this whole new culture is evolving. I mean, it's we could sit here and whine and complain about the lost opportunities and how life is different than my great granddaddy. But man, there are new opportunities coming up that we can avail ourselves with.
Absolutely.
You got to find a silver lining. We got to see the glass half full. You know what? In this day and age, you got to love duck hunting for what it is and for what it ain't. And at the end of the day, it really ain't just a stinking pile of dead ducks. It's so much more than that.
Right.
And you get it, and the folks listening get it.
And I've got 2 little girls that are ate up with it. They want to go as often as they can, and I bring home birds, and my 3-year-old doesn't let. I have to wrestle them away from her to get them cleaned, to be able to cook them up. She's just fascinated with them, just ate up with it. And in fact, I just got back from a turkey hunt last last weekend when I did a turkey hunt with my oldest. And I think your point about there's going to be changing opportunities. The opportunities are going to continue to exist, especially if we continue to follow the model we have and continue to work together and create the future for it, so that my kids, your grandkids, those future generations are going to have ducks to hunt and places to do it, no matter where that might be. And so the stories, because that's what duck hunting's about. It's about stories. It's about people and places and tradition and heritage. It's about stories, that those stories continue on. You know, you have a YouTube video about an old Colt hammer gun.
Oh boy.
And I bet I watched it 2 or 3 times. My dad, I sent the link to my dad because my dad's he's an old shotgun guy. He was all stoked. He just got his 2 Parkers back. He's got a couple of Parker VHEs, one at 12 and one at 20. And he just had the wood refinished on them. He was sending me pictures. I said, "You're going to love this video." And he did. He ate it up. Thought that was cool. You know, he's gonna order some business shells so he could shoot his Parkers. But that's what it is. That's what it's always been to me. I grew up reading Gene Hill stories, you know, and wanted to go to see the East Coast. I remember going to the Waterfowl Museum in Easton, Maryland when I was in junior high, and what an impression that left on me. And growing up in the Great Lakes, there's a rich history of especially diver duck hunting that goes back. It's old, and it's the boats and the decoys and all that stuff. And there's guys that are still using hand-carved decoys. That's what it's about. That's what it's about. And that's one of the things I appreciate about talking with you, is no matter where in the world you go, that's what you're after, is that story. It's not necessarily about the ducks. The ducks are the vehicle to get you to the story.
They're the conduit. You're exactly right. And I think every one of your listeners is nodding his head right now. They get it. I mean, that's really what some of the younger guys, you got to go through that stage and that phase.
You go through those phases. Absolutely.
You know,
absolutely.
But there's no numbers in and of itself. Dead ducks is not fulfilling. It doesn't create purpose.
Not long.
It really does. It's that tradition. It's that tradition from, and that's, you know, that shotgun represents to me how the land changed and how technology changed and how we as duck hunters from my great granddaddy to now have changed, how we of humans have changed because of technological advancements. But you take duck hunting worldwide, even in Russia, Mongolia, Argentina, the world, it's always boils down to just that fundamental of duck hunting, that tradition, that fundamental, that value, that intrinsic value of duck can be passed on. Dead ducks can't be passed on. Those values of conservation and hunting and ethos, all that can be passed on. And that's what's so important about it. And the older I get, and I'm not an old man yet, but the older I get, the more it hits home to me. And I feel like there's a lot of false narrative in the outdoor world. And let's face it, man, you know, a lot of these young people today, they don't have the benefit of a dad or a granddad to take them out and pass that tradition on. They're kind of having to find themselves. Like
who grew up
they're having to find themselves in the dark, and they need some real leadership besides just buy my product. They need real leadership, you know. So that's where we try to do. And I would invite, look, I really appreciate y'all having me on your podcast.
Oh, anytime.
I like talking about the story. I like to hear the story of duck hunting. We started a podcast ourselves right in the pitch fever of COVID. We had time, so we started a podcast called Duck Season Somewhere. I invite anybody to come listen to it, but it's not so much me talking as having guests on, everything from historians to biologists, as we travel around the United States and Canada, and we travel around the world talking to those duck hunters.
Right.
And trying to capture that conversation that I've heard so many times, that this duck hunter that practices another religion, has darker skin, lives in a different part of the world, different culture, different everything, he's a duck hunter. And here we are in a pitch black dark, different worlds apart in terms of culture and language, but we communicate perfectly.
Yes, sir.
With just a few hand signals.
Thumbs up.
We're thumbs up. We're speaking the duck. Unless he's Russian.
Yes.
You better hang on, baby. When that speedboat comes down, you better hang on.
Oh man, yeah, you're good. You're good, unless he's Russian. You're good.
Yeah, you'll be glad they got vodka back at the boat camp. I promise you.
Settle those
You
nerves.
needed to settle your nerves.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh my goodness. You know, it's funny you say that, because our Facebook page, the Wingmen Facebook page, is pretty successful actually. We've had a couple videos with monstrous views, and I would dare say that half to the majority of those views on those videos, a couple of those videos, are from Asia and from the Middle East.
Absolutely.
And I have a ton of followers that like everything I post, and they'll comment, and I got to translate it, because I got to hit Google Translate and copy and paste it in, because I don't know what they're saying. But they're hunters. They're hunters.
The Muslim world are, you know, you wouldn't believe. Do you know that the most ducks that I've ever shot unbaited, the most ducks I've ever shot in a single hunt was in Pakistan.
Really?
Pakistan. And mostly green wings, Eurasian green wings, but it was unbelievable. Those guys are serious, man, and very serious hunters.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of blew my mind. We put up I don't remember what it was. We did a pheasant video where we told the story of ringneck pheasants, and how they came to the United States, and how a lot of states use them as a hunter recruitment tool, in Wyoming included. And we went out and we shot some birds. We had some kids along. It's cool video. It's cool video. I never in my wildest dreams that I expected to have 6 million views on Facebook.
Wow.
But it does.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And I would bet the majority of those views are from Asia, you know, and from the Middle East. I didn't see that coming. But yeah, cool stuff. You know, cool stuff. Hunters are hunters, waterfowlers, bird hunters are bird hunters, wherever you go. And yeah, those stories. That's one of the things I like about your podcast is it's stories.
Yeah.
You go and you turn it on, and it's just dudes talking about hunting ducks and about the stories around it. That's cool. That's where I'm at in my phase. You know, we talked about those phases where when you first start out, you want to get a duck. No matter what it is, you got to get a duck, you know. And I look at Nebraska, and I think South Dakota went to choose your limit this year. You could choose whether you wanted a traditional 5 bird limit, or you had to stick by, you know, you could have 4 Drake mallards and yada yada, or you kill 3 ducks. Doesn't matter what they are, what species, what sex, but that's it. You get 3 ducks.
What would you choose if you hunted Nebraska?
I'd choose that 5. Because I feel like I could still pick and choose what I wanted. But if I had kids with me or people new to the sport, I'd be like, man, choose the 3. Choose the 3. Because then you're going to get to just shoot at a duck. We take kids all the time. They don't care what they're shooting. They just want to pull the trigger and kill a duck.
Is that rule limited only to a certain age bracket?
I don't think so. I think it's aimed at, I'm pretty sure it's aimed at hunter recruitment across the board, not just age. And the idea being, you know, we talk about it. At first, you just want to shoot a duck. And then you do that for a little while. And it's like, okay, now I want to shoot a limit of ducks. Yeah. And then that turns into, I want to shoot a limit of all greenheads. Oh, and then that goes into, I want to shoot a limit of all greenheads with a over and under shotgun. You know, there's different ways of doing it. It becomes about the method. And then it pretty soon becomes less about killing the ducks or the way you do it. And it's just more about being there. And if you get a couple ducks, that's great. That's kind of where my dad's at right now. I don't get to hunt with him much, but he comes out in the wintertime, and we had my best day in the blind last year was with him, and we shot 3 ducks. Shot two Drake mallards and a Drake green-winged teal.
Real life happens between the volleys.
That should be on a t-shirt.
You know, it really does. It's because duck blinds are the least woke places on earth. I can talk about anything.
Yeah.
You know, and how little do you really talk about ducks or duck hunting in a duck blind?
Not very much.
And
a little bit.
It really hit home. Yeah, I remember back in high school, there used to be these bracelets, WWJD, what would Jesus do? I never wore one. But let me tell you what, I had kids and I wanted one WWAD, what would Andy do? Because, man, kids will throw you curveballs. Yeah, maybe your kids ain't old enough yet, but I scratched my head many times going, what would Andy say to Opie right now?
Right, they're starting. You know, my oldest is starting.
But by the time they got in high school, especially as they got, you know, junior, senior level of high school, you see, you know, with sports and girls and studies and iPhones and just all the modern day encumbrances, you know, you just don't see your kid as much as you think you would. And but boy, we've been a duck blind together, and we had those conversations you wanted to have and you needed to have, and it wasn't forced; it just came organically.
Right. You say that we did a father kid, mostly girls, did a goose hunt a few years ago, and 2 years ago, and 3 little girls, 4 years old. And one of them was Guy Eastman, Mr. Big Game himself, calls me 2 nights before. He's like, hey, I got a favor to ask. I said, what's up? He said, can I go goose hunting with you on Saturday? And I said, well, yeah, absolutely. Of course you can go goose hunting with me on Saturday. He said, well, there's a catch. I got to take Cora. I got to take my daughter. I said, perfect. She's friends with my oldest daughter. And then we got another guy in the office who has a daughter the same age. So we just took all 3 of them. And then another guy brought his son, who was, I don't know, 14 at the time, never killed a goose. We went down there. And Ramsey, it's exactly what you said. It wasn't about the birds. And there were lots of birds. And we killed more than we, you know, more birds than we really needed to kill. I mean, we didn't kill a limit, but we had plenty of fun, is what I'm trying to get at. But that's not what it was about. It was about an hour into the morning. And the guy looks over at me. He's like, this isn't about hunting. This is just a coffee club with shotguns. That's all this is.
That's right.
And donuts. And I said, I said, you're damn right. I said, that's exactly. He's like, well, if I'd have known that, I'd have been coming along the whole time.
Heck yeah, I guarantee you.
You know, but it's not like an elk hunt where it's high stakes. You know, where you're going to go out and you might get one opportunity at the animal the specific animal you're after. So you miss a volley on geese. Wait 20 minutes. There'll be another bird or 2 come through. And our kids were running around. They're all wearing bright pink snowsuits, and it doesn't matter. You got them in a blind, you know. And good grief, it was about chocolate milk and donuts and coffee and having a good time. And we killed 15 or 20 geese, and those kids still talk about that hunt to this day. And one of the things that Guy said was, you know, it strikes me that if you don't get them out there at that age and continue that on through, they'll never take to it, because they get too many competing factors later on as they get older.
They do. And I've said this a million times, but I believe it to be true as a daddy. Children spell love Time.
That is so true.
And I just don't think, if there's a better place to spend that time with children than the outdoors, I don't know where it is.
No, I completely agree. And, you know, we're blessed where we live because we have a big backyard here in Greater Yellowstone country.
Oh, don't you?
There's places I don't take them because of the local wildlife, you know, I don't want to have a problem with a 4-year-old and a grizzly bear, but otherwise, I mean, my gosh, what better place to raise them, you know? And I have some friends down in the South, Georgia and Alabama, and they come out here, and it takes them a little bit to adjust, to just let your kids go. You know, we'll be up in the mountains, and it's like nothing's going to bother them here. Just let them go run, let them go play, let them do their thing.
Yeah,
you know, they're not going to get kidnapped out here. Nothing bad's going to happen to them. You know, and it's pretty cool, but you got to start that early, and that's part of what it goes back to with duck hunting for me. That was a time to spend with my dad. You know,
the paradox we were talking about hunting pressure earlier, and the paradox is this: it's a foregone conclusion that our children are going to hunt or be introduced to hunting, but still hunter participation is declining.
Overall, yep.
And what we need is what somebody coined the term adult onset hunter. We need these. You think about this.
I agree.
Think about this guy. An 8-year-old kid is going to be 20. It's going to be 2 decades before he can meaningfully contribute to that economic benefit.
Absolutely.
The 30-year-old sitting next to you that would just like to go out and share a blind, he can contribute now if he gets eat up with it. The paradox is, where they're going to hunt, how we're going to get along, how we're going to manage hunting.
That was kind of what I was getting at with my, are we hunting ducks too much? You know, with that question, are we trying so hard to make it? And I don't think we are. I think
we hunters can get along. I really, truly, in my heart of heart, I'll tell you something very interesting. When I first started GetDucks.com, we first started going to Argentina, say 18 years ago, one of the first questions, and this is a very small sample size, anecdotal observation only. One of the first questions, one of the top questions, how many ducks can I kill? And now we're booking many, 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 many more hunters. And that question might eventually be asked.
Sure.
But it's not, it's all about the experience. And I see that as I see that as kind of like a value system or something evolving in the American hunter, that quality over quantity. And I truly, in my heart of hearts, believe that we hunters collectively, the majority of us, can work together to with the NGOs, with the state and federal agencies, to come up with to perpetuate the future of hunting in a meaningful way. I got faith in not all of humanity, but in the hunting segment of humanity, the folks I know, I got the utmost faith in us to fix this thing.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And yeah, and we're blessed here. Like I said, we got a big backyard to play in.
Hunters don't eat Tide Pods,
Yeah, pretty much. No, I completely agree. But well, dude, we've been talking for almost 2 hours, so that's a good chunk of time, and I've had a great time visiting and chatting, and we need to get you out here. And I think you said Wyoming was one of the states you hadn't killed a bird in.
Well, I've hunted down. Hunted down the Southwest, but there's a real good chance I'll be swinging through your neck of the woods this year. We did that North American tour last year, and I just enjoyed it. The only problem is this year, convention and SHOT Show will be going on, so that will be a little bit of a stick in the spokes. But I plan on traveling from September through into January, less except that couple of weeks, and I will be coming through Wyoming sometime. And
holler at me. Yeah, holler at me.
Then I'm gonna turn on the recorder and we're gonna have your conversation, have your interview.
Sounds good. We can absolutely do that. I would
invite anybody listening to check us out, duck season somewhere, social media at Ramsey Russell Get Ducks on Instagram. Stay in touch. It's a very organic, and we're not a production. It's just organic,
You bet. No, that's one of the things that I like about yours is it's just stories. It's organic. It's raw. It's real. I like it. But
I appreciate y'all having me. Thank you.
Thank you for jumping on with us. And I'm gonna end the record here.